As far as metal music is concerned, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better decade than the 80s. So many great bands made their debut, and in many cases, they released their greatest albums during this time. In this video, we're going to count down the top 10 greatest metal albums from the 80s. And to keep things fair, each band can only be included once, otherwise this list would have been populated entirely by Iron Maiden and Metallica. So, kicking things off at number 10, we have Mötley Crüe's Dr. Feelgood. Released in August of 1989, this album spawned a whopping 5 singles, including hits like the title track, Without You, and the song the Crüe are probably most famous for, Kickstart My Heart. With this being their 5th album, they had really honed their craft by this point, and that is evident by the number of great songs on this record. Number 9 comes from Judas Priest with their British Steel album from April of 1980. This album features Priest classics from start to finish, and even the dubious reggae intro to the song The Rage doesn't detract from what is a classic piece of British heavy metal. Most non-metal fans are familiar with songs like Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight. But for me, the highlights are Metal Gods and Grinder. I often wonder what would have happened if I had listened to this album before ever hearing Iron Maiden, because there's a very good chance that the Priest would have replaced Maiden as one of my all-time favourite bands. Number 8 is the first of 3 debut albums to make this list, and is the self-titled album from Skid Row. Released in January of 1989, this is one of the greatest debut albums I've ever heard, and the fact that the majority of these songs still feature prominently in Skid Row's live set speaks volumes. There are no skippable songs on this record, and while most will point to I Remember You and 18 and Life as the highlights, I would suggest that songs like Big Guns and Making a Mess are the real highlights. This album, of course, gave Skid Row and their former singer, Sebastian Bach, their signature song in the form of Youth Gone Wild. It may seem a bit odd having a bunch of men in their 60s chanting that they are the youth gone wild, but hey, time waits for no man. Another debut album hits the number 7 spot, and this time it's from W.A.S.P. They released their self-titled debut in August of 1984, and while often lumped in with glam metal bands like Mötley Crüe and Poison, I'm of the opinion that W.A.S.P. were always a straight-up heavy metal band. I have already mentioned that Skid Row's first album was one of the best debuts ever. Well, this offering from W.A.S.P. is up there too. As with most great debut albums, many of the songs still feature in the live set to this day, and songs like I Wanna Be Somebody, Love Machine and Hellion sound just as good in 2025 as they did 40 years ago. For me though, the real highlight of the album is the track Sleeping in the Fire, which I consider to be one of the greatest metal ballads of all time. Number 6 is the Peace Sells album from Megadeth. Released in September of 1986, this was the album that put Megadeth on the map. From start to finish, it's just non-stop classic thrash metal with songs like Wake Up Dead, The Conjuring, and the title track, which is universally recognized as the theme from MTV News. For me, a real gem here is the closing track, My Last Words, which is often overlooked, but if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend checking it out. Staying with the thrash metal scene, we have Anthrax at number 5 with Among the Living from March 1987. This album was my introduction to thrash metal, and the sound of palm-muted, chugging guitar is something I've been in love with ever since. Despite having had moderate success with their previous album, Spreading the Disease, it was Among the Living that made Anthrax a household name. With classics like Caught in a Mosh, Indians and the Judge Dredd inspired I Am the Law, it's easy to see why most people regard this as the best album in their catalogue. If I had to pick one highlight from the album, it would have to be the riff from the title track, which most certainly falls into the top 3 of the greatest riffs ever. At number 4, we have Back in Black from AC/DC. It's never easy when a vocalist is replaced, and 9 times out of 10, it's the start of a downward trajectory. but AC/DC managed to reverse that with Back in Black, which was released in July of 1980. Original vocalist Bon Scott had sadly passed away in February of that year, but the band wasted no time in hiring Brian Johnson and got to work on a new album. There isn't a bad track on the album, and despite the sad circumstances related to Brian Johnson's hiring, AC/DC put out their finest work. Each song is a classic, but unfortunately, I'd be quite happy to never hear You Shook Me All Night Long again, due to the fact that rock radio has overplayed the song to the point where I get annoyed whenever I hear it. The Young Brothers really showed that they could overcome adversity with this gem of an album. Number 3 gives us Appetite for Destruction from Guns N' Roses. Released in July of 1987, this was the album we never knew we needed. In a landscape that was starting to be dominated by thrash metal, this album came along and kicked everyone in the arse. Appetite is as raw and sleazy as it gets, and quite frankly, is a masterpiece. I've heard it mentioned that this is the greatest debut album of all time, and if I'm being honest, I really can't argue with that. From Slash's delayed guitar intro on Welcome to the Jungle to the final note of Rocket Queen, this is a classic case of all killer and no filler. While the highlight for me is Paradise City kicking in following Axl Rose's whistle, my favourite memory of this album relates to the song Mr. Brownstone. One of my classmates had brought the cassette of the album into school, and as we all gathered round the boombox, the line, "But that old man, he's a real motherfucker, gonna kick him on down the line," made us laugh like the schoolboys we were. It wouldn't be a top 10 of metal albums from the 80s without including Iron Maiden, and to be honest with you, picking just one album from them was almost impossible. However, at number 2 in the countdown, we have the album they released in May of 1983. Peace of Mind was the first album to feature Nico McBrain, and it's his drum intro to Where Eagles Dare that kicks things off. From there, it's just classic Maiden all the way through, and while the singles Flight of Icarus and The Trooper are the most well-known, it's hidden gems like Die With Your Boots On, Still Life, and To Tame a Land that really get my juices flowing. I could have picked any of the Bruce Dickinson Maiden albums from the 80s for the number 2 spot, but I feel comfortable in my decision. Before we get to the number 1 metal album from the 80s, I just want to stress how difficult this was, and there were so many albums that didn't make the cut today, but could easily have done so on any other day. So, with that out the way, let's see what made the number 1 spot. This probably comes as a surprise to no one, but we have Master of Puppets from Metallica. Released in March of 1986, this was the album that showed the world that thrash metal wasn't just some fad that would soon disappear. While it's not uncommon to find albums where there are no songs you want to skip, Master of Puppets is one of the few albums where each and every song demands your full attention. The album starts with Battery and ends with Damage Incorporated, and for just under 55 minutes, it's a masterclass in heavy music. The fact that all 8 tracks have featured prominently in the Metallica Live set for almost 4 decades speaks volumes of how well regarded these songs are by the band and fans alike. It would be unfair of me to pick out just one song as being the best on the album, as they're all as good as each other, but I will say I particularly like the heaviness of The Thing That Should Not Be Due to its dropped tuning, which really makes it stand out. Sadly, this was the last Metallica album to feature Cliff Burton, as he was tragically killed while on tour promoting the record, but his legacy lives on with this masterpiece. I know I've probably missed your favourite album in this countdown, but as I mentioned previously, picking just 10 was extremely challenging. But please do let me know in the comments what albums you would have included. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all next time.